This video is brought to you by Transparent Express. This video is going to look through James I and his financial reforms, financial difficulties, whether him and his ministers were successful in making any financial reforms that were effective. Spoilers, not really, but they tried-ish. So that's today's video. I think I'm going to do some English ones at some point as well, and I'm going to do James I. I might go on to a Swiss expansion if I can be bothered. So I think we first just look at different ways of collecting revenue and collecting money at this time in 1603 to 1625. So if we look at ordinary income, which is ways to make money such as things like crown lands, custom duties, feudal revenues, things that come like natural income on a yearly basis. But then extraordinary revenue is something that has to be asked for. So usually subsidies and then any parliamentary grant. So if we first look at James I, when he came to the throne, he had a £420,000 debt from Elizabeth I, which, I mean, it is a lot, but it's not actually that bad because he still had quite a lot of money coming in from the 1601 Parliament. And also £100,000 of that was to be given to landowners, debt to landowners, from a forced loan from Elizabeth. However, there was little expectation this was actually going to be paid back. So when we go through now and look at all the financial problems of James, we need to look at how they were of his own making and of the making of the ministers and the people during his reign rather than what he's inherited. So if we first look at crown lands, which were the most profitable source of income at the start of James's reign. So these are just lands that the crown, so the king, owned essentially, and then people paid to have to use the lands. And so they were really profitable, but there was a lot of problems concerning them. So there was difficulty in extracting the rent and the income from the lands, as it was unpopular with the people who were on the lands, and James wanted to please everybody. So he wouldn't really be demanding and asking for these rents, which kind of lessened the value. And also they were an important source of patronage, where the leases were on favourable terms for that reason. Again, it's just kind of being nice and a way to reward courtiers and stuff like that. And also their importance diminished throughout the reign because Lord Treasurers often sold them because they were a quick and easy way to make a lot of money by selling the land. They were a quick way to get money, and also in Charles's reign he also sold quite a few of them. So by the end of the Stuarts era, they were pretty much non-profitable. The way that the crown made money was through purveyance, which is the right of the court to buy provisions, so like items at a cost that's below the market rate, so like a discount for the court, where they could buy things for cheaper than they should have been. And this was generally established because the court used to move around the country a lot. So it was like when they moved to like a different part of the country, it'd almost be like a gift for the court whilst it's there, like it can buy things for cheaper. However, this was a problem where it was open to gross abuse and misconduct because a lot of courtiers would buy in bulk things at this cheaper price and then sell them off for more. And also the court stopped moving around at this point. It pretty much stayed like London, Oxford area. So it put the burden on them, which obviously people were unhappy with. And Parliament wanted to get rid of purveyance. It was one of the things that it got really annoyed about, and it was a source of tension between the two. Another way that the crown could make money was through wardships, which was where if owner of a property died before the heirs turned 21, then the property would go in the hands of the Court of Wards, which was like a branch of government which would control these like big estates, and then they could make profit from them, which was again a big source of tension between Parliament and the Crown, because what would happen is that like, the master of the Court of Wards would kind of take the estate and then sell parts of it off and kind of put it into ruin, making profit from it. So by the time the heirs could get it, it was a wreck of what it once was. So again, it was something that Parliament wanted to abolish. Custom duties were also a really big part of ordinary income, which was tonnage and poundage at this time. So it was just a tax on import and exports, and it was one of the biggest ways, again, that James could make money. And by 1621, it brought in nearly 3 times as much revenue as the crown lands. So we can kind of see the importance of them. Crown lands going down and tonnage and poundage becoming a more important source of income for James. And also he could make more profit of these through custom farmers, which I think I'll get into in a later video. Now if we look at extraordinary income, we can look at parliamentary taxation and the subsidy, which had a lot of problems. It was irregular, it was only meant to be raised during emergency times, it was just generally outdated in how it was collected. The value of it had dropped, especially with inflation, that makes it a lot worse. So it meant that the money that was being raised by the subsidy was increasingly worth less and less as the years went on. And also the way it was assessed, because people would like assess it themselves, or neighbours would assess it for neighbours. But the point is, nobody's going to assess either their true worth or a friend's true worth, essentially. So people like Buckingham, who was the richest person in England at the time after James, and was estimated to be worth 400,000, he only taxed himself to be worth £150, which is absolutely mental. So where the subsidy is meant to be an accurate evaluation of the taxpayer's wealth, it really wasn't, and it was hugely underestimated. And then the big problem with this as well is that it kind of cloaked the other important issues regarding problems with income. So things like James's extravagance, he could hide behind that and kind of blame it on these corrupt individuals, where the most rich people in England, these big landowners who need to be the ones who are paying the taxation to help keep the country stable, are just not kind of helping out. They're not taking responsibility for the cost of the kingdom, which is a huge problem. And then also because these are such important figures, they often dominate Parliament, stuff like that. So they will have the say in reforms of income, so they're not going to want to reform the subsidy, and it's going to be difficult to change because it benefits them, so they're not going to want to do anything about it. And then the financial income, what comes in, is going to be really low still. Another big and possibly the most important reason why James's income was insignificant was because he spent too much of it on stupid things. His extravagance was absolute madness, and it was probably his biggest flaw. When he came into the throne of England, he significantly overestimated the wealth of the country, because he came from Scotland, which was nothing like the wealth of England, but even still, I think he overestimated it, and he called it like a land flowing in milk and honey and all this palaver, but then just spent all the money he had and didn't realise he had to balance it out so he could stabilise the country, didn't think about that. And also his generosity was really significant in this. He overspent on other people and himself to the point of financial irresponsibility. For example, he spent £522,000 in 1614 at peak for other people, like courtiers and people. Similar to the corruption in parliamentary taxation, we also see a lot of corruption in these key ministers themselves. So even somebody like Salisbury, who was a very popular minister, is seen as being very good, he was still corrupt in some aspects. So in 1609 he gained £400 from a wardship that earned the crown just 370. It's a very small example, but it just kind of shows how everybody, even someone who generally I think did care for the country's welfare and economic purposes, was still corrupt in some extent. And then we get people so now we can look at ways that both the Crown and Parliament tried to aid in financial reforms in England and the Union in general, trying to make it more stable. So the first opportunity we can look at this is the John Bates case, which was in 1606, and it was where he refused to pay the imposition, so the duty and the tax on currents, and this case went to the Court of Exchequer, who ultimately favoured in the King's prerogative and said that James had the right as the monarch to control and regulate trade for the security of the realm. So basically this gave James a free pass to implement as many impositions as he wanted, which he definitely took the opportunity, and so he published the Book of Rates in 1608, which put impositions on 1,400 different items and provided an extra £70,000 each year to the Exchequer. So that was helpful, but then it did cause a lot of tensions in Parliament, who deeply resented these impositions and wanted them to be abolished. Essentially because not only was it seen as unfair, it was also a problem because Parliament couldn't control this tax. I think Parliament liked to have as much control over James's finances, especially since he was so extravagant. They didn't trust him with the money. They were to have as much control as possible, and these impositions put the money directly in the Crown's pocket, so they didn't have any control over that. Now we can look at another attempt at financial reforms, which comes from Robert Cecil, the Earl of Salisbury, and this was in 1608, and it was called the Book of Bounty, and it was an attempt to prevent James' extravagance and prevent him from spending so much and being so generous mostly. So for example, it prohibited the Crown from giving away major items to courtiers, so things like land, monopolies, which I'll get onto later. And he also, Robert Cecil, wrote up grants, which kind of limited the amount of money that James could give to his courtiers. However, James still found ways around it. He still just gave away bulk cash to people. For example, in 1610, he gave away 36,000 just in 4 months. Yet Cecil did have some impact in restricting James' extravagance. For example, when Robert Carr became his new favourite, instead of just giving him a new manor and money, Cecil made sure to give him the estate of Sir Walter Raleigh, who we'll talk about in the religion video. But this is a way to kind of move around property instead of James just getting it out of royal expenditure, which should be used in more productive ways.